advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are so excited. For the first time on the show, we have Aimee Sackrider, and we have her on audio, and you're seeing her lovely picture there. But Aimee, let's welcome, first of all, and let's start with talking about what your exact role is at CARD. What do you do and where?
Absolutely. So I am in San Antonio, Texas, and I am a clinical manager for 2 of our offices in the area. So my primary role is to support our BCBAs in both offices and oversee the clinical quality in both of our offices, as well as help new families as they come in and help our operations managers a little bit with the admin side of the office.
And I honestly feel like you guys have something really special going on in San Antonio. There's a pocket of wonderful people, and you're a part of that. And so I thank you for everything that you do there. So Aimee is an autism expert, and we're going to ask her some of the questions that you guys have written in. So Aimee, the first one, this is so funny, we just did Extinction Burst. I forgot because I sent these to you a while ago. So they said, I would like to understand extinction. My therapist says, put it on extinction, which I think means ignore it, but sometimes I ignore it and I'm wrong. What am I not getting? This is kind of great because this is the most misunderstood thing, I think, for parents.
Absolutely. Sure. So the good news is you're kind of on the right track with this. But what it comes down to, and I'm sure you talked about this on the show many times, Shannon, is it comes down to the function. It depends on why the behavior is happening. And of course, there are 4 reasons why the behavior could be happening. It could be because the person doesn't want to do something that they're being asked to do for escape. It could be because they want something they don't have, and access to tangible. It could be because they want some sort of attention, or it could be because they're doing it just because the behavior feels good in and of itself, an automatic function. So extinction means that we are breaking that relationship between the behavior and the usual result or reinforcer. And so if your child is engaging in a particular behavior for attention, then using planned ignoring or not giving them attention is using extinction. That's called attention extinction. However, if they are doing the behavior for one of the other 4 reasons, one of the other 3 reasons, escape, access to tangible, or automatic, then simply ignoring the behavior is probably not going to work the way you want it to. If they are engaging in a particular behavior because they don't want to do something, and then you just ignore them, then probably what's happening is they are getting to get out of that particular task or escape the situation, which is probably going to make them do the behavior more rather than decreasing it the way you're trying to. So the good news is if the behavior is happening for attention, then ignoring it or ignoring the behavior is using extinction, but you really want to make sure you're clear on what the function is before you decide to ignore the behavior.
Right, because and what I had just been saying with extinction burst is it's like cutting off the blood supply of what's making it happen. And if you cut off the wrong blood supply, because attention is the thing that you're giving when you're ignoring a behavior, and if that's not the blood supply, then that's why you've got it wrong. And I think that too often people explain extinction as planned ignoring, and often it isn't. So Hopefully that makes sense. But what she said is what I'm going to say. What she said. Okay, so the next question, that was great, Amy. So the next question, I have a 3-year-old recently diagnosed with autism. He goes to school in a special autism program. Now ABA says 40 hours. School says quality is more important than quantity. 40 is too much with school. What do you say?
Got it. So I'll preface this by saying that it definitely matters what your son's specific circumstances are, and of course I don't know those. But what I can tell you is there is a really large body of research to show that the earlier and more intensively ABA intervention is provided, the more progress a child will make. And if you think of it like this, the purpose of ABA is really to make as many possible moments of your child's time a learning opportunity as you can. And we have the luxury of doing that really, really frequently if we're working with them for 40 hours a week. And right now, there's a certain amount of things that your child doesn't know how to do, right, that their peers do know how to do. And with time, that gap is just going to increase, right, because their peers are going to continue learning pretty quickly, and your son may have certain deficits that are interfering with his ability to learn at the same rate that they are. And the goal of ABA is to close that gap as quickly as possible, but as kids get older, it becomes harder and harder because their peers are learning so quickly. It's easier to do when they're littler and there are less skills that they're already expected to know how to do. So right now, while your son is still so young, I would definitely urge you to consider a high-intensity ABA program. One of the things that, kids get from school is the ability to interact with peers, and that is really important. But if you find a high-quality ABA program, they should be able to make sure that they are incorporating peer interaction as part of the program so that he doesn't miss out on that. Another thing to consider is if he doesn't have some of the really important skills that he needs to be successful in school right now, then being in school may not offer him all the same learning opportunities as one of his peers might have. So ABA might be able to help make sure that he learns those really important early foundational skills so that when he does enter the school environment later on, he's going to be much better equipped to have a successful experience and really be able to learn in a school environment.
And, you are so wonderful and have given such a wonderful example of what this is. But I'm going to say, as a parent whose child who has been through a 40-hour program at the age of 3, and I've seen the benefit of what that is, please, and I'm a teacher, and I love schools, and I love teachers. Please listen to this expert. And she says you may want to consider, and I'm going to tell you no. Please do a 40-hour program with your 3-year-old. And if you have 7 available minutes outside of that, make sure that you're learning how to do the 40-hour program and doing it at home. And if there is time in amongst all of that, after you have prioritized that and gotten those 40 hours, if there's a minute to go to school for a 3-year-old, sure. But I'm going to tell you, I doubt that that's a reality. What's going to happen is school is going to say, we have a program from 8 to 9:15, right? And that's the only time you can come there. And if that's a time when you have a therapist that could be doing one-on-one ABA, please do the therapy up to the 40 hours, because that's what the studies have shown that's effective. Please, please, please. Schools are telling everybody now, we just talked about this yesterday on the show too, they have this new thing where they're saying that quality ABA is more important. So do 10 quality hours of ABA and then come and do their full program. You just have to remember that the only way they get paid is if your child goes to school. And that ask these people who are saying this, where is the study showing that that is the truth, that 10 hours of quality ABA plus school gets it done? There is no study. Go find a parent that was able to do that on 10 hours of quality ABA therapy and their child went to school, and I will show you a parent who's in tears saying, I wish I'd done it differently. So please, please, please Don't take my word for it. Ask the people at school who are telling you this information where their studies are, and then I will happily send you studies that we have that show that the opposite is true. Get the 40 hours, and then I will shut up about that. The next question, Aimee, is that it says, thank you for your show. My son is 8. He was diagnosed at 4. Things are going well, but not on back and forth conversation. He tends to monologue, and if I attempt to stop him, he shuts down and won't talk. What can I do?
Okay, good question. So I would start by making sure that your son understands expectations for what a back and forth conversation looks like. So first of all, does he understand that expectation is to take turns? You say something, I say something, we go back and forth. You want to make sure that he knows what the expectations are, right? Because no one's going to be successful unless they kind of have guidelines for what they're supposed to do. And then what you could do is you could use some sort of visual to make this a little bit more concrete for him. So each time someone says something, they put a block on a tower, or you trade like a talking stick back and forth when it's your turn to talk. Something that makes it clear for him that he understands that there is an element of turn taking within conversation, right? And then it might help to start with preferred topics. Pick something to talk about that he likes, so that he's going to want to talk about it, rather than trying to start off by taking something he doesn't care as much about, or what he did at school that day. Those things, while we might be interested in them, those might not be the most interesting thing to your 8-year-old. So I would start with talking about something that he's interested in, so that the motivation is already there. And then after he's doing well with that, you can expand out to maybe other topics of conversation that aren't his favorite thing to talk about. So those are just some tips for kind of getting started. And then, there's so much that goes into conversational skills. So much. But this is a good place to start in terms of making sure that he understands that there should be an element of taking turns with that.
What fabulous, fabulous advice, because I know a lot of people struggle with this. So, Aimee, thank you so much for being with us and providing these fabulous answers. Getting to have a wonderful expert like yourself to help fill in these gaps for parents is such a pleasure. Again, you are in, which of the San Antonio offices are you in?
I spend half my time at the San Antonio office and half my time at the Helotes office.
There we go. Okay, I knew it had a fun name, Helotes. So thank you on behalf of your parents that you work with and the supervisors and the families that you work with. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And will you please say hello to everybody there, especially to Oscar, who I ran off the phone very quickly to get you on the phone. But hug him for him, because Oscar is another part of the magic, just like you are down there, because if you are a Texas family and you have gotten to meet Oscar, then you know what I'm talking about. So thank you all for all the work that you do. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Shannon. I've been a fan of your show for a really long time, so it's a pleasure to get to be on.
Yay. Well, we're going to have you back when we can have picture and sound.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Aimee.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Oh, she's so wonderful. I love the talent that we have. I'm still riding high on the fact that I just came back from visiting some of our offices and just seeing all the amazing, talented people that get to work with our kids. It's just it makes me feel whole. In any case, we're a little bit caught up now, so we're going to take a break, and we are going to get Bonnie Yates on with us, and she's going to be answering more of your questions, so stick with us.
Dr. Grandin, what is it like for you personally to have become the most celebrated person in the field of autism?
Well, I feel it's a responsibility. I get a lot of emails and letters from young kids. In fact, at the last conference I was at, I got a whole envelope of letters from kids in an English class. What makes me pleased is I think I'm inspiring a lot of kids to succeed, because I want to see kids succeed. Now, one problem I'm seeing with some of the fully verbal kids is they're not getting stretched enough. I see kids coming up to me at conferences where nobody's taught them how to shake hands. See, when I was a young child, I had to be party host at my mother's parties. I had to shake hands, say please and thank you, have table manners, learn how to shop. And I'm seeing too many situations where they aren't learning those basic skills.
Yeah, so you really think they need the basic skills that every child should learn?
Yes. Now, in the 50s, every child was taught social skills in a much more structured way. And today, that's not the case. Now, the so-called normal kids, they pick it up. But the autistic kids have got to be taught.
Okay.
And that's not being done enough.
What kind of preconceptions, though, do you think most people have about relating to those with ASD?
Autism is a really big spectrum. You're going all the way from Silicon Valley down to somebody with a lot of intellectual challenges. Now, the kinds of services and things a person needs is very different, those two ends of the spectrum. And I go to different places. I go to Silicon Valley, and I see a lot of people that I know are on the spectrum. And then I go see another kid that's smart at math, but nothing's being done to develop his skills, and he's getting addicted to video games. And they are the same kind of kid. The thing that I'm seeing, especially on the mild end of the spectrum, is too many kids sort of becoming the label. I'm very concerned about them getting a handicap mentality. Then I go over to the meatpacking plant, and there's a whole maintenance shop of old hippies that I know are on the spectrum, and they run that maintenance shop. And they've been there for years and years and years.
Why do you think the numbers, 1 in 68 now, have risen so dramatically?
I think on the mild end of the spectrum, it's increased detection. Because I can think of kids I went to elementary school with, kids I went to college with, that today would be diagnosed on the spectrum. I think that's a big part of it on the mild end of the spectrum. Now, I think there also is some severe autism that may have actually increased because there's more environmental contaminants, and there's more medications being given during early pregnancy.
Dr. Grandin, you beg parents not to let their children with autism be defined by the DSM or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Why?
Well, I think the DSM made a big mistake removing Asperger's syndrome. Because under the DMS-4, autism you had to have speech delay, Asperger was no speech delay. Now, you could argue scientific reasons for taking out the speech delay stuff, but from a service provider standpoint, you know, the kind of services that somebody's nonverbal as is different than a mild kid with Asperger's. And I'm seeing too many fully verbal kids, less severe than me, getting put into a class with nonverbal kids. I'm seeing too many smart kids not learning job skills. That's another thing that I really push. Because when I was 13, my mother had got me in a sewing job. When I was 15, I was cleaning horse stalls. It's really important that students intern in a job before they graduate from high school. They got to learn that discipline of getting to work.
If you could speak to every business owner in America, what would you say to convince them to hire somebody on the autism spectrum?
Well, there's certain things they can do extremely well. In fact, the SAP Corporation is hiring people with autism. There's another Project Search, where there's work being done with collaborating with hospitals to train them to set up surgical instruments for different types of surgery. And they take longer to train, but once they're trained, they're super, super good and meticulous about making sure the instruments are set up right. And that's got about a 78% employment rate.
So you think the skills that those with ASD have to offer are often overlooked by people that employ?
As I said before, I can think of kids that I went to college with that definitely were on the autism spectrum. Those individuals are all employed in good jobs. And I think a lot of this gets back pounding those manners in the 50s and the 60s, and kids being on things like paper routes, where they learned work skills.
Why do you think the experts in the field of ASDs focus so intensely on the deficits and not on the strengths of autism?
Well, we need to be building up strengths. My ability in art was always encouraged. And I was encouraged to do lots of different kinds of art. If you got a third grader that's good at math, and he can do a high school math book, let him do the high school math book. Don't hold them back.
I want to know why you think that so little attention has been paid to the sensory processing issues. What can we learn from those?
Well, I just heard about a brand new study that's been done up at the in California, Dr. Wu, and they took children aged 4 through 12 that had speech delay, and they stayed in their regular programs, ABA or whatever the speech therapy the school was doing, and then they got an hour a day of sensory therapy where they did a lot of variety of stimulation, like walk on different kinds of flooring, smell different smells, do different activities in a mirror, big variety, always doing more than one sensory thing at a time. And it was done as a controlled experiment, where half the kids just got the regular treatment and the other half got this added sensory treatment. And they got some really big, significant improvements. And they made the point of using all very inexpensive things that would be in any house.
There's so much division in the autism community. How do you think we can all come together and find a common ground?
I think that merging Asperger's together with autism has made all of this worse, because you have a segment of very, very severely handicapped kids where they're never going to be able to live independently. That's a very different kind of situation than a mild Asperger's type of kid. You see, you're putting too many apples and oranges together. Every other diagnosis, like dyslexia, learning problems, ADHD, you've got a fully verbal kid. Only in autism, right now, are you getting a range going from, smart computer geek down to somebody that has very, very severe challenges. Now, I think the American Psychiatric Association originally figured the Asperger kids would get into this social communication category. That's not what's happening. Nobody's going into that because there's no funding for it.
As the most admired person in this field, and we are literally becoming an autism nation, what do you think the most important thing is for us to be aware of?
Well, there's a point where personality variants are just normal variation. I think a brain can be made more cognitive and thinking, or a brain can be made more social. Now, at what point does that become abnormal? There's no black and white dividing line. I'm getting concerned that what we're saying is abnormal is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Obviously, a child that has severe speech delay, that's an abnormality. But when you take the kids that are just kind of socially awkward, a lot of those kids are really smart. And then you got the person that's a total social butterfly. And let's think back to the caveman days. I don't think the social yak-yaks around the campfire made the first stone spear.
Dr. Grandin, thank you for inspiring all of us as parents and children. Hello, fellow activists. Last week, I introduced you to step 5 of the 10 steps to empowerment, shore up spiritually. Let's talk more about finding ways to do that, how to find out what lifts your spirit, feeds your soul, and make it a practice. That practice is different things for different people. It could be the practice of meditation, of prayer, of community worship, or serving others. But it's the practice that will give you hope and faith and strength for the journey ahead, for the marathon journey of raising a child with autism. I get inspired every day by the families of children with autism that I come into contact with, like the parents of the nonverbal child who have not given up hope that that child will speak one day, or the grandparents who should be enjoying their retirement but instead are joyfully raising their adult grandchild with autism, or the mother who is fighting for services for her daughter while her Marine husband is fighting a battle to keep our country safe. They all inspire me. My grandmother, Diddy, who is an angel who still guides me every day, had this quote inscribed in her Bible. I sought my soul, but my soul I could not see. I sought my God, but my God eluded me. I sought my brother, and I found all three. I think I'm finally starting to grasp the meaning of that. So feed your soul, lift your spirit, and until next time, keep the faith.
Thank you so much for joining us again. We are here with Julie Mominee. What a great name, first of all. And she is our autism expert for the day. She is the senior clinical lead manager in Southern California in a pocket of offices. Which offices did you say again, Julie?
The Cypress, Garden Grove, and Santa Fe Springs
offices.
Wonderful. I love those offices. So Julie's answering your questions. This next one is, hello, I'm a special education teacher on my lunch break. How can I get a parent on board with our behavior plan for her son? He's in 7th grade. Mom reports there are no behaviors at home. At school, he has several, and I know that mom and dad tiptoe around him and don't ask him to do anything because demands are a trigger. He runs the house. He's 12. How do I get mom to see that her behavior plays a part in her son's behavior and that it needs to change? It seems almost impossible, but I know that you will have ideas, and thanks. We're all on the front of our seats to hear what you have to say to that, Julie.
Yeah, this is a great question and something that we commonly deal with as clinicians and teachers working with individuals with autism. And, consistency is one of the most important things when it comes to behavior change. So if an intervention is not being implemented with consistency across environments and across people, you're not going to see the progress that you may see if there was consistency. So a couple of things. When I work with parents on implementing an intervention, I first assess whether that intervention is practical for the home setting. So maybe like what you're able to do in the classroom with maybe additional support or aids in the classroom, the family may not be able to implement the same type of strategy because maybe they just don't have additional support at home. Especially if they have been conditioned to essentially give in to the behavior in effort to avoid one more behavior battle with their child. An intervention can seem overwhelming. So first you want to make sure that the intervention can be done in the home setting. And then also, to simplify it, put it in terms where the family can understand what the strategies mean. When we use or create interventions, sometimes we use behavioral jargon. So when we communicate the strategies to parents, we need to make sure to put them in layman's terms or use examples in everyday life for it to make sense, which in turn will make it easier for them to implement with accuracy. Sometimes also the interventions can seem overwhelming, especially maybe they have, some fear of the behavior that might happen if they do follow through with something. So, if they're not able to implement all parts of the intervention, are there a few things that they can start with and be successful with? So that could be, choosing a couple of antecedent modifications or preventative strategies like transition warnings, letting them know that something's going to take place or that they're going to be asked to do something that maybe they don't want to do. Or, maybe it could be a schedule, at home of the activities that, the child will be engaging in for that day. Or, focus on reinforcing appropriate behavior and start there, because that's going to be easier than, maybe following through with a task demand. So, just finding out ways that maybe they can be more successful. And then the other part of it, too, is, and I don't know how often you're able to have communication with the family, because I know as a special education teacher, you're very busy, and so you may not have the one-to-one time with the family to build rapport. But if you do, I would recommend setting up consistent, weekly or even monthly check-ins with the family to see how things are going, seeing how you can support them in the school environment, see if they have any questions about the interventions. And in some cases, I have worked with teachers that do home observation. So I don't know if that's an option because, building rapport and trust with the family, it's more likely that they are going to, take what you say more seriously and see how it's going to benefit their child. And that's another thing, too, is, it's important to have an open conversation with the family about their priorities and what their goals are for their child, and then tie in what you're doing in the classroom setting that is going to help their child get to where you want them to be. And if you're able to make that connection, it's more likely that they're going to be on board with your intervention.
I love that answer. I love that answer because if it's not something that's important to us, we're going to be less likely to work on it. If we don't know how to implement the strategy, it's not going to happen. If we are afraid, even if we know how to implement the strategy, but we don't know how to deal with the consequence of it, the behavior that comes back, we're only going to do it once. All of those things get in the way of a parent participating. And making it easy, making it clear, keeping the jargon at a minimum. You're hitting all the right buttons here. We appreciate that. Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself, how on earth can I afford ABA therapy for my child? Well, the short answer is you can't. No one can. It's really expensive and it's overwhelming to most families. But the story doesn't end there, fortunately. The first thing that I want you to think about is tapping insurance resources. So many insurance companies are paying for ABA therapy right now. So that's your first best bet. Make sure and see if your insurance company is providing benefits for ABA therapy and check back often. Now, if you see that you don't have insurance right now for ABA, don't panic, there are still other resources. The next place to go is to your local support groups and ask them what local resources there are. That's a great place to ask for information because often states and even counties have support for ABA. And then beyond that, you might consider applying for grants. There are many fabulous grants out there to help you to get support for your ABA therapy. But most important, it's absolutely essential that you get ABA services for your child. We know that that's essential for all of our children and that you won't be able to do it on your own. So seek out those services and support groups that will help you to fund your ABA journey. It's really important to remember that all behaviors happen for a reason.
When Maddie was diagnosed, I'll be honest, I was very ignorant on what autism was. I knew that autism was basically something that hit boys at the age of 2 to 3 and shut down. And with Maddie, she was doing all the same signs and symptoms of a typical child with autism spectrum disorder.
Stand up.
I was thinking that we might be moving somewhere so that people could assist us either in the house or us going to see our daughter, because she was shutting down to a point that she wouldn't even recognize you being there by putting your hand in her face and yelling her name.
She didn't even acknowledge us coming into the room. She had barely any eye contact. She didn't interact with her sisters. She didn't really do anything. She just basically lined up her toys and that was about it. With 8 volunteers, including my husband and I'm the team leader, and so I do all the curriculum and get everything ready each week.
Jana was downstairs until 11 o'clock at night working on curriculum, going through 2 different textbooks.
Look, who's that?
And then we, as a group, meet on Monday nights, and we would go through what the curriculum was from Jana. And a lot of times we would go, well, how exactly do you do that? How do you sit her at the table and do this trial base? With what skills has done for us, it's taken that away from Jana trying to figure out the curriculum for one. She can go down, or even our laptop, and she can sit down and through all these questions, it comes up with the different programs.
At least for me, it was a relief off my shoulders. I was worried that I might be missing a curriculum that maybe she needs to know, where skills, they have every possible thing your child needs to know from 0 to 7. They have a program for that.
What noise is this?
Good job!
Every program that we did with her, I knew it was specific for what she needed to learn. Because before skills, it was a lot of, okay, well, is that really age appropriate for a 2-year-old? You know, because it's not generalized. It's anywhere from 0 to 7. This is what your child needs to know in most manuals you'll find. But for this, okay, yep, she should be learning this. And no, she's not 4 yet. She doesn't need to know that yet.
We are so fortunate that Jana was able to attend a conference put on by CARD that opened the door for skills, and that there's no looking back for us.
We started using the program in November, and it seemed like by January something just clicked. And she has completely kind of came out of her fog that she was in for quite a while.
I have never read a documented case on any child that has not benefited anything from applied behavior analysis, and now with this new skills and being, you know, like the E version of ABA, I can't imagine that it doing anything harmful to their child. It's nothing but exponential growth for us.
To see her now, it just blows us away. I mean, we call her our little miracle child because in 7 months' time, she's just blossomed into this normal, functioning child.
She is developing roundly, she is socializing, she's playing with her peers, she's learning from her peers. It's very joyous.
Maddie, can you tell me what you see outside?
Snow.
Snow?
If you're even thinking about doing it, do it. Because the absolute worst thing you could do is do nothing at all. And even if you use this program and it's just a single mom or a single dad working in the evenings with their child, this program is going to benefit them. It's going to show you where they are, it's going to show you where they need to go, and it's going to show you what skills and how to get there. It is an online book on how to help recover your child.
Hi, this is Lisa Ackerman. Welcome back to Talk of Facts, frequently asked questions and answers for the autism journey. Now this one is specifically for teens and adults with autism. I get this question all the time: what's new and exciting in the medical world today for teens and adults with autism? So let's talk about them. TMS, transmagnetic stimulation therapy, is something that is really exciting. I met with the author John Robeson. Look me in the eye. He's a gentleman with Asperger's, and something I hope all of our kids to strive and grow up and be just like him. He's amazing. He talked about TMS therapy and how he became more social aware. His smile was more natural, and I definitely can better understand things around him in those social settings. Another really great treatment that we're seeing just a ton of research on in the last 3 years is cerebral folate autoimmunity. You know, in the 90s, they started putting folate in all of our different foods and products. Well, some people, they have found out, and specifically a high percentage of children with autism don't process folate like how they should. Go figure. They don't do it the way the books say it's going to happen. So cerebral folate autoimmunity is just a really exciting new therapeutic to work with your physician on and to look to see if your child is a candidate for that therapy. And another common thing that we're seeing in teens and adults, and we've talked about it before in Talk of Facts, is seizures. Very serious issue that needs to be looked at. Abnormal brain waves or brain patterns or epileptic activity in the brain definitely needs to be addressed in children with autism. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I know doctors that can go through and work and look at the child and perform a 24-hour EEG. What they're finding with some of these anticonvulsant or seizure medications is kids start to make great gains in speech, cognition, sleep, learning, by treating any type of seizure activity. So, and the other issue is pandas, not the cute fuzzy bears that we see in the zoo, but an issue that is happening with a lot of teens and adults on the spectrum, where you see a dramatic change in behaviors. with these individuals, and often they have an inappropriate immune response. TACA has a great white paper, so you can go look up in the PANDAS definition what to test and treat for and talk to your doctor about. But know that if you see an extreme swing in behavior with a child that goes from one place to a very negative place, we're seeing a lot of teens positively responding to treatments for PANDAS. And the last treatment I wanted to talk about, and I'm super excited about, and this happens to not just work with younger kids on the autism spectrum, but also older children on the spectrum, teens and adults. It's called mendability. And a great study just came out of UCI in May 2013 about a multisensory approach for individuals with autism. The whole premise behind the therapy is very simple, making it a sensory-rich environment so neural connections can make new pathways or at least connect in that individual. So kids with sensory issues, auditory listening issues, speech issues, they seem to really just respond to mendability. And I was so excited to see that new research. More research is being done on it. And the beautiful part about mendability is it's something parents can do on their own, administer with their child, and be connected to their kid as partners in the autism journey. Don't forget in any therapy or medical intervention to work with your physician and to do proper testing to know what your child needs and what treatments to pursue under a physician's care. So there's so many new things. I could go on for hours about new treatments and excitement, but there's the top ones that just have me so geeked here. But that's another Talk of Fact. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time and on Real Journey, Real Questions and Answers to help your autism journey.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We love this new segment that we've got that's called Ask an Autism Expert. Joining us via a lot of different mechanical, technological things is Gabriel Meyer. And Gabe, we're so excited to have you on the show for the first time. Tell us a little bit about what your role is at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders.
Okay, well, I'm excited to be on the show, Shannon. I currently am clinical lead manager for now a number of different centers. Previously, I worked at our Santa Clarita Center in California, and now one of the roles that I've taken on is, because our family moved to Wisconsin, I'm supporting offices in some of our high-growth regions in Virginia, Maryland, Louisiana, where maybe we don't have that clinical lead support in those offices, and we want to make sure that the supervisors there are getting the support that they need, that the families are getting the clinical quality oversight that they need, and just kind of troubleshooting any other issues that come up, working with the operations team and those that are there on the ground in those states.
What a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So, Gabe, we have some questions that some of our listeners and viewers wrote in, and I'm going to ask you the first one. It's, how can I know, this is such a great question, how can I know when I should start potty training my son? He is 3 and nonverbal.
Yeah, there's a number of things that you need to consider at this point. Obviously, being 3 years old, the mom is kind of right to start looking towards potty training. The problem is that sometimes we want to make sure that the child has all the prerequisites necessary for potty training to begin. One of the big ones is going to be, can this individual or this child withhold their urine and their bowel movements for long enough? And so what you would need to do is you kind of need to make sure that you're tracking how often you're having to change the child, and usually you're looking for at least a couple of hours they need to be able to withhold. The other big factor here is that this child is nonverbal, which isn't necessarily a barrier to this child being successful with beginning the potty training process. The issue here would be, does the child have any sort of communicative skills? If they're on a PEG system or an augmentative communication system, then we might be able to get them to learn some of the indicative procedures that they need to follow. Maybe saying they need to go potty, or pressing a button on their iPad that indicates that they need to go. One of the areas you could start with this is just getting them to identify wet versus dry. It could be really helpful, so that way they can discriminate between those two things. But Yeah, ultimately, there's just a few of those prerequisites that we need to try, and then yeah, if your child meets that criteria, and even the communication part of it doesn't necessarily even need to happen. If they're withholding long enough, we can really start bringing them to the bathroom on an interval, and getting them to at least try to capture that moment where they are going to the bathroom while they're on the potty. But again, there'd just be a couple of things we'd want to evaluate for your child first.
One of my favorite things in talking to autism experts, in the autism community and among parents, there is this great fear that what if we aren't able to potty train our child, and we all have these nightmares about how, one of the first things that was said to me as a parent, once my son was diagnosed, and somebody was trying to make me feel better, and they were saying to me, oh, I have a friend and her child has autism and he's doing great. And I was like, really? Tell me about him. What's he like? Oh, well, he's 15. He's not potty trained yet. And I had nightmares about that, right? I was just like, oh, and I think a lot of autism parents have this great, great fear. But I love hearing experts talk about it because you guys are kind of amazing in your attitude towards it, that you really have cracked the code on potty training, that when it's done properly, and you guys all love the Fox and Azarin method because you know that it works, that really you can have great success with potty training. And I have yet to hear of a single child that they were not able to potty train. Some take longer than others, but that pretty much everybody across the board, I don't want to say everybody because if there's a medical issue, that can make it harder, but pretty much everybody gets potty trained and it's not this big loop-de-loop. So I appreciate you giving us some of those precursors to know when it's time, but I hope that everybody takes a deep breath and realizes that this is very, 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 very doable for kiddos.
Absolutely.
And I loved your assurance. You were like, well, and we can do that. I just love that attitude. So I'm going to move on to the next question. They write, my son is 11 and he has a lot of issues. Recently, my sisters suggested I get him looked at for Asperger's, which I looked up and it doesn't even exist anymore. Can an 11-year-old get diagnosed with autism? I saw that Amy Schumer's husband got diagnosed. He's a chef. Maybe I don't know what autism is. What should I be looking for in an 11-year-old?
Well, there's a lot of things to unpack in this question, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that an 11-year-old absolutely can be diagnosed, that is something that I want to assure, anyone. Honestly, anybody can be diagnosed if they meet the diagnostic criteria for autism. And the reality is, no, you don't need to have somebody assessed for Asperger's. Asperger's is just a kind of another form of autism that we've kind of now integrated in the new DSM-5 criteria. It's all within the autism spectrum kind of umbrella at this point. But previously, Asperger's, I think what this person would have been referring to would have been that their child kind of meets criteria for being a high-functioning individual. And so when we talk about that, when we talk about the domains that an individual that's 11 years old that hasn't yet been diagnosed, I'm sure that this child probably has a lot of prerequisite skills, probably has language, probably has a lot of these adaptive skill sets that we'd probably expect about an 11-year-old to have. But it wouldn't be surprising that if this individual does kind of meet the criteria for autism, that maybe they're demonstrating some deficits in areas like their social responsivity, their understanding of areas like emotion, some of their executive functioning process. Maybe they're just really disorganized. They could be experiencing some of the other things that kind of come along with having autism. Maybe they're depressed because they're struggling socially. So there's a lot of reasons that maybe this individual should get that diagnosis, because then people like CARD and our therapist team here and supervisors here can develop a program that would be appropriate for this individual, that would meet them where they are. We don't need to start everybody with a program that's highly intensive with regard to language, but we could actually evaluate the domains that this child is specifically struggling within, and then see what we could do in terms of a treatment plan for them.
So you mentioned a couple of different things to be looking for, that if they're struggling socially, if they're struggling with, you were saying really, really disorganized and not being able to keep things together. Because one of the things this mom was saying, like what should I be looking for? It is this whole, they call it a spectrum because there is a spectrum of people, and people can have different symptoms. I love the saying, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, right? So it's kind of hard to pin down, but I always wonder why, when you get to this point where somebody else is saying, you know, maybe you should have your child looked at for, and let's imagine that it was, you know, that they said tonsillitis, or that they said maybe you should have your child looked at for shin splints, right? Hopefully we're all getting our kids to a pediatrician on a semi-regular basis for well checks. I just don't know what the harm is in asking, right? Because, excuse me, you know, it doesn't mean that your child's going to be labeled forever to ask. And the truth is, as you were saying, if you are someplace like CARD, they can help your child to overcome whatever their deficits are, no matter what they classify it as. So my question is, why not get it checked out to be sure? What do you think about that?
You know, just on that topic, I think that absolutely get it checked out. And it is a bummer. And even, you know, this parent brought up Amy Schumer, and Amy Schumer has kind of drawn a lot of tension recently with regard to kind of bringing up how, yeah, it's that stigma that her and her husband are trying to kind of fight against. It's too bad that there is a stigma attached to the autism diagnosis, because in this child's case in particular, they could really benefit from services like what we can provide at CARD, but any ABA services from any provider. Doesn't need to be a CARD, you know, just that these individuals have access to treatment. And the sad part is that even an individual that is operating decent in a number of domains where maybe that they haven't needed that diagnostic evaluation or that diagnosis previously, now that they're running into some of these challenges, you know, the only other options for support is maybe like a once a week therapy session with a CBT psychotherapist, right? And that'd be great that they meet with a psychologist once a week, but we would get to maybe meet with that individual on a more regular basis, and really apply. And not saying that they wouldn't benefit from that CBT, but man, it would be great to even collaborate with that professional, that other professional, and then apply a lot of what maybe the cognitive behavioral therapist is recommending for that individual in a setting where, you know, our therapist can go to the mall, can go to potentially the school with that individual, and really work on some of these goals in the environments in which they need to be learned. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that they brought up, and you brought up, Amy Schumer and her husband. Man, we are all loving on Amy Schumer right now. The things that she has been saying, you know, I was saying last week that she and her husband could have decided to keep this very quiet, and they didn't have to come forward and say anything at all. He is a successful chef. They are happily married and have a baby on the way. They did not need to, for their sakes, to come out and say, hey, by the way, here's what you should know about us. But the fact that they did, and that she has been so positive. I was saying to you, I think she's done more for the autism community and awareness in the last 2 weeks than probably the rest of us have done in the last 2 years, which, you know, we've all been trying to make sure that people know that autism is not something to be feared. But Amy Schumer is saying, you know, one of the things that I realized when my husband was diagnosed was that all of the traits that qualify him for being on the autism spectrum are the reasons why I fell in love with him. Oh my goodness. If I ever meet her, I'm going to hug her.
It's a great utilization of her platform. It really is. And when you have the ability to reach that many people and kind of, you know, change some things, it's great that she's utilizing her platform for that.
Absolutely. Really wonderful. But definitely for this mom, get your child looked at. Do that without fear, knowing that, like anything else, if they see that your child has a deficit in something, that even if it's a social deficit, there are things that can help. And I love that you recommended doing ABA, but also having a cognitive behavior therapist when kids are older. Super, super great. Okay, moving on to the last question here. My daughter is 4. We are CARD clients, and she's making great progress. My question is, how can I get my husband to learn what the therapists are doing? It's not that he doesn't care, he just doesn't know what to do, and when I try to teach him, he doesn't get it. And I'm going to guess, too, that creates friction between mom and dad when mom's trying to train dad. So what do you recommend, Gabe?
A number of things. We have a parent support program. It's part of the CARD model. So not only do we have our clinics and the therapy that your child should attend, but optimally, obviously we require at least one parent, but it would be so great if both parents were attending all parent meetings. And I like to call them parent meetings because a lot of times they get, labeled as parent trainings. But yeah, in this situation, dad could probably benefit from a parent meeting where maybe we really worked on the behavior interventions that, we have currently in place for her daughter and really allow the BCBA on their team to be the one that articulates that information to dad, maybe models and demonstrates some of that information because mom's probably in the process of still learning as well. So it'd be great if both parents got to attend together. It could be an opportunity for them to really, become more aligned on the treatment for their daughter and really understanding what's happening there. And yeah, you're right. It would allow for mom to maybe not have to be in the position that she's in currently, which is disseminating all of that information to dad when she's trying to absorb it and understand it herself as well.
Yeah, when we found out about CARD, we found out from another family. They recommended CARD to us and really were our Eskimos coming to CARD. And one of the first things that the mom said was, you're going to have a clinic and you need to attend that clinic like it's the most important thing in your world. You're going to rearrange your entire life around going to that clinic. And she said, oh, and by the way, it's not just for you to go. Your husband has to get off of work to go. And she said, federal law provides for your employer has to let you out for it. I know none of us wants to do that. None of us wants to go to the employer and say, hey, once a month, I'm going to have to take this, part of this morning off for the next year to 2 to 3 to, it was 5 years in our case. Nobody wants to go to the employer and say that, but the truth is you're protected, that they cannot fire you over that. They cannot pass you up for promotion over that. It's law. So know that, but I think back now about how much, because this mom said before we even started, and she said, this is what you have to do if you want to be successful. That was then what we did. And I met people along the way, I still meet parents who are like, yeah, but we just can't. And I know I would have said that, Gabe. I know I would have said that, but this mom said to me, no. Rearrange your life, prioritize that. You both need to be there. And even with both of us there, I learned things faster because I was at home more. I was working from home. And at a certain point, my husband came to me and said, I don't get it. Why does he do this for Peter? And why does he do this for this therapist? And he does it for you, but he doesn't do it for me. And I was not very generous at that point. I said to my husband, well, you better learn this. You better pay attention. You better get on the bandwagon. But we had a great supervisor who said to me, you need to not be there some of the times so that dad is the only person, because I'm such a strong personality that I would always jump in. And she said, you need to be unavailable. You need to go shopping or something. But I think back all the time, Gabe, on that and think, my husband and my son are so close. They have such a good relationship, and it's because he learned how to do what the therapist did. So I appreciate that you're telling them that they both should go to these clinics, that it's important.
And ultimately, even if for whatever reason there's some sort of other additional barriers, reach out to your supervisor. See what the supervisor can do in terms of accommodating schedules. Maybe we can create additional time that's outside of the working time. It can be challenging, and maybe there's some times where dad can get off work a little bit early, and that supervisor can be available for a parent training in the evening. I can't make promises for any particular supervisor, and it ultimately comes down to just that old saying, hey, my mom always said all you can do is ask.
That's right.
And so where there's a will, there's a way. And if your husband is interested and cares, then just ask and see what kind of accommodations can be made.
Absolutely. Don't give up on your husband. Pull him into this because it will make a difference. Gabe, you've been fabulous. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And for those of you who are in a place where CARD is starting to come to, maybe you'll get to meet Gabe in your travels. And we'll look forward to having you back again on the show, Gabe.
Sounds good, Shannon.
All right, you take care.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye. Wonderful, wonderful, our expert for the day. I'm going to hang up there. And we are going to take a break. I'm looking at the time. Oh, yeah, we're late to talk to Bonnie. I'm just late today. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with Bonnie Yates, special education attorney. Stick with us.